Good afternoon, church. Please join me in this meditative way of setting our hearts open for the Word of God. In my heart, Lord, be glorified. Be glorified. In my heart, Lord, be glorified today. In our lives, Lord, be glorified. Be glorified. In our lives, Lord, be glorified today. In your church, Lord, be glorified. Be glorified. In your church, Lord, be glorified today. Please be seated. There's a big elephant in the room. It's me. And the elephant in the room is sermons and homilies are supposed to glorify God in our lives, in our hearts, and in His church, in her church. And yet, what's on my mind and in my heart, and perhaps you're thinking another Bud moment. And so the elephant is, this homily isn't about me. This homily is about God and Jesus and God's church and God's people. Years ago, when Lois Stevens was a mentor of mine, great storyteller, the life of this diocese, and she died, and there was a parable. I couldn't find the exact parable again, but it came to mind as I was thinking about today's homily. It's a parable about the singer. It could be the parable about the storyteller. It could have been the parable about the preacher. It could have been a parable about the disciple. It could have been a parable about the shepherd. But as the parable was being told, it was clear from the person telling the parable that it's not all about the singer. You know how much I love to sing. It's not about the singer. You know how much we love to tell stories. It's not about the storyteller. You know how much we all seek to be shepherds, feeding God's lambs and God's sheep. But it's not about the shepherd, unless it's the good shepherd. It's really all about the song, the story, the word, the great commandment. It's all about feeding. It's all about singing together. It's all about telling the story together. It's all about preaching the word and witnessing to the gospel of Christ together and feeding God's sheep together. So the elephant in the room, I hope, is getting a little smaller so that we can focus on our singing and not the singer, our storytelling and not the storyteller, and our feeding and healing and not the healer, unless it's Jesus. I love to visit parish churches, and when this particular gospel is so important to me, I've loved it for years and years, and when I was consecrated here's another one, Sam, when I was consecrated on March 25th or 6th, it was the feast day of Oscar Romero. That's 3 times we've heard about Oscar Romero today. And Frederica preached on feeding sheep and a bunch of other things. But one of the reasons it's important to me is because I learned a song years ago from my good friends at St. Mary's in Dorchester. And I use it, I sit down with the kids, and I tell them this story, and I say to the kids, one day Jesus said to Peter, "Do you love me?" And Peter said, "Yes, Lord." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And I do this 3 times, and the kids are rolling their eyes. And then I say to the kids, "Do you love Jesus?" And every once in a while there's a wise guy in the group that says no, but they all said yes. And then I said, "Do you love Jesus?" And they said yes. "Do you love Jesus?" Yes. And then I said, "Do you have any sheep at home?" And they go, "No." "Then who are you going to feed?" And they talk about feeding cats and dogs, each other, until we finally get to the broken and those who need healing and feeding. And we're talking about feeding and healing and praying for and helping others. It wasn't about the song, it wasn't about the singer, it wasn't about the storyteller. It was about Jesus, loving Jesus, and feeding Jesus' sheep. And so we do this together. I wrestled with saying yes to preaching today because of the elephant. Getting a little smaller, I hope. And but Mally convinced me that I could do this, and she said, "Just share your dreams." And that could also be pretty self-centered. But thanks to the convention today and yesterday, I've heard a lot about dreams. A lot about dreams. In the preaching, in Tom's meditations, and every convention I come to, I learn more and more from this man through his teaching and his preaching. And so the way in which I want to share dreams comes a little bit about dreams and desires that I've been sharing with clergy around the diocese for the past 9 months. And we talked about what are their dreams for their ministries in their church when they came and where they are now. And then we talked about what is God's dream and what are we dreaming for God's church for the future.